National college football writer for 247Sports.com. And as you might expect, Chris, a lot of Heisman Trophy fallout talk on a Monday morning here in West Central Alabama.
Yeah, I would imagine most people in Tuscaloosa in the area are pretty satisfied with the results at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, not so much, Chris, but let's talk about it. Let's talk about your thoughts on sort of how this thing played out. Did you expect Kyler Murray to win the award? Was the vote about like you would expect in terms of first place nods, maybe total ballots appeared upon, just the overall total in general, how it all played out, Chris?
Yeah, I thought Kyler would win. I think recency bias is real, and Tua kind of struggling down the stretch didn't help him. I think it's a little ridiculous that some voters kind of held the championship games as a deciding factor in this race. Tua was brilliant all season long, and you really shouldn't hold an injury against somebody for their Heisman candidacy, especially when they excelled the rest of the year outside of that. I actually think a bigger knock on him would be what Mississippi State did. You kind of saw what an elite defense can do against Alabama's defense, although you could also argue the fact that Kyler didn't play anybody like Mississippi State. But I think recency bias was the main difference. I was a little surprised to see Kyler get as many first-place votes as he did. I thought the split would be a little bit more even, but at the end of the day, the Heisman voter pool is very varied. It's not everybody in that group pays attention to college football all the time, and it's when you just looked at the pure numbers, Kyler's numbers were better than Tua's, and I think that made the difference at the end of the day for a lot of people.
Do we have too many people voting on the Heisman Trophy? Or maybe a better question would be, as you sort of alluded to there, maybe we don't have enough people who are actually locked in on the week-to-week happenings in college football.
Yeah, I like to use this as an example. If anybody ever watches ESPN, Dan Le Batard has a show where he hosts with his dad. His name is Poppy, and he's essentially an old man who just makes funny jokes. He has a Heisman Trophy vote, and I don't think he watches much college football from week to week.
Oof.
So, yeah, I think there are a lot of voters who probably don't follow the sport as closely as they should. But the pool is really large. That usually means the right person wins, not always. And a close race like that, this year, I think that can make the difference, and that's something that the Heisman Committee could examine. I'm not a voter personally, so I can't really tell you how the process works in depth. But there are a lot of voters, and I know a lot of them don't necessarily cover the sport from week to week. So that can make a difference over time.
Yeah, Chris, we have a Pops on this show on Fridays. He's just up the coast in Jacksonville. Maybe we can get him Poppy's vote. We can get that maybe transferred to our Pops and maybe get a little more of a legitimate effort there when it comes to the Heisman Trophy vote. In terms of the three finalists, Chris, I mean, I'm not knocking any of these guys. I mean, your third place guy in Dwayne Haskins threw 47 touchdown passes for Ohio State University and finished third. So, I mean, that kind of tells you what we were left with here in this trio. You got to go back a little bit, don't you, to find maybe a three as strong as this?
Yeah, I thought the last time there were three this strong was probably, I believe it was 2008 when Sam Bradford won over Colt McCoy and Tim Tebow.
Yeah.
Like that was a really, really strong year, and I think this was similar. But even considering that year, what Dwayne Haskins, Tua Tagovailoa, and Kyler Murray did were kind of on another level. They all smashed records, kind of depending on what you want to look at. Dwayne broke every Big Ten passing record there is for a single season. Tua set Alabama's single-season record book on fire, and he's one of the most efficient passers in history. And Kyler dang near broke every record that Baker Mayfield set last year. And Baker had a historic season himself, setting the NCAA record for yards per attempt and passer efficiency. So, like, these three quarterbacks were just special. And to have them all line up in the same year was very rare. And I think in any other year, Dwayne Haskins probably wins the award like 70% of the time. Maybe he doesn't beat out Cam Newton. Maybe he doesn't beat out Johnny Manziel after the seasons they had. But I can't think of a lot of circumstances where Dwayne doesn't potentially win that award, and he finished a distant third. So that kind of tells you how good the group was.
From a defensive perspective, we know unless you go Charles Woodson and play a little offense to go along with defense, you're pretty much not going to be in the mix. Although Quinnen Williams of Alabama finished 8th in the Heisman Trophy balloting on Saturday night. Your best defensive player in college football, because we have to have separate awards for those guys. We know the Nagurski, those type of individual awards are really for those guys. They're the defensive Heismans, basically. Quinnen Williams, Josh Allen of Kentucky. We saw both those guys prominent on the individual awards circuit. Who would you go with as the top defensive player maybe in college football this season, Chris?
Heading into the year, it would have been Ed Oliver by a pretty wide margin, but due to his health kind of this year, I don't think we ever really got to see Ed Oliver, who he is. In my mind, a pass rusher from the edge is a little bit more valuable than an interior rusher. I know you could probably argue that all day. You kind of see the impact that Quinnen Williams has in the middle. But I would also argue that Josh Allen's playing with a little less around him than Quinnen is on the offense or on the defensive line there at Alabama. Like Raekwon Davis really gets it done, and Isaiah Buggs is also a standout defender. Both of those guys are going to be NFL draft picks next year or the year after. From Josh Allen's perspective, he just does so much so well. He can kind of hold the edge as a run defender. He really excels at rushing the passer. He's great leverage. He has great speed. He can cover from side to side. And he can even cover when you need him to. I know Kentucky doesn't have him do that a lot, but he has from time to time. And I just think with that Kentucky defense as good as it was, if you take Josh Allen off of that group, I think Kentucky wins 2 or 3 less games. That's how good I think Josh Allen is. And I lean towards him a little bit, especially when you kind of consider what Quinnen Williams plays with around him, even though like places like PSF probably grade Quinnen Williams a little bit higher than everybody else. I just kind of lean towards the edge rusher on the slightly worse team.
Yeah, Josh Allen leads the SEC in tackles for loss and sacks this year, and had some seasons leading up to it that I think help him as well. Again, he completely validated his place for these awards based on this season alone. But with Quinnen, more of an under the radar guy, right, coming into this season, and that factors into some of this, I would think.
Yeah, no doubt. I think probably 95% of the college football viewing public had no idea who Quinnen Williams coming into the year was. And honestly, I wrote quite a bit about Alabama's defensive tackle situation. I didn't really touch on Quinnen Williams a lot either. He kind of really came on during the spring and the fall, and he had a huge year, and he's going to go in the top 5 of the NFL draft more than likely. So that won't matter to the NFL folks in the year. But I think the hype coming into the season definitely has something to do with how familiar award voters are with a person and kind of how you're evaluated in that regard.
Talking with Chris Hummer, the national college football writer for 247Sports.com on a Monday edition of Southern Fried Sports presented by Carty and Lloyd, attorneys at law, and also Mercedes-Benz of Tuscaloosa. Okay, Chris, Alabama gets on-campus preparation for Oklahoma in that Capital One Orange Bowl matchup on December the 29th, underway on Friday afternoon here in Tuscaloosa. If you're defensive coordinator Tosh LaPoy, co-defensive coordinator Pete Golding, Nick Saban, obviously, with his defensive background, and you're getting ready for this Oklahoma offense, obviously Kyler Murray is the focal point. But what else is it about this OU offense that could potentially give Alabama some problems on defense?
What Lincoln Riley does best, and I've talked to coaches who will say this, is he essentially disguises plays in a way that he always finds a way to get somebody very open. He uses RPOs extraordinarily well, and what Oklahoma really excels at is kind of holding the fake a little bit longer than most people and having essentially a blocker kind of slip out into the second level and kind of usually a lot of times be wide open. You're going to see Oklahoma utilize their fullbacks a lot, and they use their tight ends in a similar way, and it works almost every time. Nobody's better at designing that than Lincoln Riley, and Kyler Murray is excellent at knowing when to pull the ball out or take off and run with it himself, and it's used to devastating effect. So discipline is going to be the name of the game for Alabama's defenders. I think they're probably used to that in a lot of cases, what they see in the SEC. You really have to stay home on your guy, and you have to play a sound football and kind of stay in your gaps and stay where you're supposed to be. Otherwise, Oklahoma will expose you. Nobody's better at it than the Sooners. So that is the main area, and I would imagine Nick's going to be focusing quite a bit on that in practice.
Responsibility football, similar to almost taking on a triple option offense. It's just that Murray can do it vertically rather than laterally with the pitch to the halfback. So it should be an interesting matchup, no doubt about it. I know we'll talk about it more leading up to the game. What about the other side of the ball? I mean, when you look at this Oklahoma defense, obviously through the air has been a big problem for OU. A little bit better against the run, I guess. So it's unprecedented, isn't it? I mean, a team that's in the top 4 and 12-1 went through a coordinator change at midseason on one side of the ball. You just don't see that, but I guess it kind of speaks to the struggles OU's had on that side of the ball. Is this defense, in your opinion, trending one way or the other? Has it gotten any better since Stoops was dismissed, or is it about the same? What have you seen?
Well, I know one thing. I wouldn't want to play Tua after losing the Heisman Trophy in a couple weeks if I'm Oklahoma, but it is getting a little bit better. I think you're seeing a much different brand of football from the defense. Ruffin McNeil is calling a more aggressive game. He's trying to create turnovers. He's trying to kind of bring some pressure, which Oklahoma's really struggled with their defensive line because it has trouble kind of creating that on its own. In that regard, it is a little bit better. I think against West Virginia, you saw Oklahoma create 2 defensive touchdowns. Oklahoma had 2 turnovers against Texas that kind of turned the game. And from like just a pure yardage perspective, it is hurting the team a little bit more. Statistically, Oklahoma is actually a little bit worse after the coordinator change. But if you talk to people around that program, I think you're kind of seeing their guys get a little bit more. It was a pretty big midseason shift, even if they probably won't talk about it like that in public. They did change a lot of stuff, and they're playing a little bit more aggressive, and the team is kind of getting used to that 4-down look a little bit more. In that regard, it is improving a little bit. You saw it against Texas. I believe they only gave up 6.3 yards per play, which is, I guess, almost 2 yards less than their season average. And Texas can really challenge you vertically. So in that regard, it is better. I wouldn't really consider it a world beater or anything at this point, and Oklahoma is going to have to be 5 times better in order to slow down Alabama. But it is improving slowly, and I think this month of preparation is really going to help that Oklahoma defense.
Yeah, I mean, if you're giving up red zone scores like Oklahoma's given up this year and third downs, why not be more aggressive and try to just take away the football as much as possible? Because it's not working in the other aspects for that defense, or it hasn't for much of the season anyway. Hey, Chris, as always, my man, great stuff, great insight. Always enjoy you being here with us on the program. Give Chris a follow on Twitter at Chris_Hummer, and check out his great work at 247sports.com. All you got to do is go to 247sports.com, search Chris Hummer. He'll be right there. You'll find him. He'll probably be on the front page right now for all we know. Hey, Chris, thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, guys.